Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone that's with us over the internet. It's always good to have you all here back for another Sunday, for another lecture. Today we're going to be having a lecture by our friend Tiago about you cannot serve both God and mammon. So it's a very interesting subject. And but before our lecture, as I was going to have our initial reading and our initial prayer. Give your enemy another chance and promote reconciliation. Be receptive. He may have changed his mind, recognized his mistake, and may be waiting for an opportunity. We all make mistakes and would like a chance to make amendments. If you shut yourself up inside your hurt and want nothing more to do with him, you are being worse than he was. Do not let self-love or wounded pride rob you of an excellent chance to triumph over yourself. And that's from the book Happy Life by Divaldo Franco in the spirit of Joana de Anjos. Let us all now connect with God, with Jesus our Master, and all the good spirits here present. Ask them to enlighten us through this lecture. Help us to open our minds and our hearts to all the teachings that are going to be brought today to us. That we can also open ourselves to all the light and all the good fluids that we are already receiving here in this house. We are grateful for being here, grateful for this opportunity. This will be it.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, everybody's just like me. Very, very slow. It was so hard to get up today. Okay, again, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. Now I know you are here. Very good to be here in this nice summer day. Thank you for being here, even though we could have been, jogging outside. So many people jogging outside. I was very jealous, actually. Makes me feel like exercising as well. And today we are going to talk about a theme that when I was, reading about it, it feels like one of those topics in Spiritism that I can call, Spiritism 101 can be taught using this lesson. And I will explain a little bit why. That is such an important topic. So important that not only, it is in a very special place in the Bible itself, that is a very special place in the middle of Jesus' teachings. And also, Allan Kardec dedicated an entire chapter for this subject. So it's not a coincidence that this is important for us. Sometimes we don't think, I was surprised. I'm always surprised when I'm reading, when I am learning, when I'm studying. And I was very surprised with the depth and the importance of this topic. So hopefully we can, unpack a little bit some of the lessons from this topic today. And we can make sense and try to apply this, in our lives. And the very first question is, does anybody know where in the gospel, where in the Bible this passage is? Like when Jesus talks about you cannot serve both God and mammon. Sometimes we don't put all the, the content in the right place. So let's put in context. For me, at least for me personally, one of the most beautiful and touching and important passages in the entire gospel is when Jesus sits down on the mount and seeing the crowd that was following him. He sits down and he takes the opportunity to teach them. And that is called the Sermon on the Mount. It is that in the book of Matthew, chapter number 5 and 6 and 7. And there is so much in this beautiful, conversation of Jesus with everybody. I sometimes see myself sitting down, listening to him. You can imagine that, the scenario, around. You can imagine sitting down and thirsty and hungry, but not only of food and drink, but thirsty and hungry for knowledge, for hope, for healing, for consolation. And sometimes we stop in Matthew 5 with a few of the, passages. That's when Jesus says, blessed are those who weep. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? Blessed are those who are hunger and thirst for justice. But Jesus continues teaching us. And this specific passage has a very interesting place. Before that passage, Jesus is teaching us how to pray. Jesus teaches the Lord's Prayer. And after that, Jesus will then teach this specific passage, which I will actually, put in context for everybody. And that is very interesting because Jesus puts that lesson for us in a very, very special place. Jesus is teaching us how to connect with God, how to draw ourselves to the spirituality. At the same time, we know that it's not simply sitting down and reciting a prayer. It is not simply repeating words. That is not the way that we draw closer to the spirituality. But that is a condition for that. And put very simply, it is we draw closer to the spirituality when we spiritualize ourselves. Coincidentally or not, after Jesus teaches us how to pray, he then takes the opportunity to teach us about those conditions. And not only Jesus tells us you cannot serve both masters or both, God and mammon. But after teaching us how to pray, I will then together recite with you. And I brought the passage, the full passage. Jesus tells us, do not lay up yourselves treasures on earth. Do not lay up or tie up yourselves with treasures on earth. And he will continue. Where the moth and the rust will destroy, where thieves will break and steal. But lay up or tie up yourselves with the treasures in heaven, where neither moth or rust will destroy, where thieves do not break and steal. And here Jesus is giving us such a powerful message. Right? Jesus is putting in perspective the meaning of our existence on earth. Yes, we need to take care of ourselves, of our incarnation, of our bodies, of the resources that we have at hand, the material resources. We need to work. We need to find compensation for it. We need to use that, the fruits of our work, of our labor, for our betterment, for our survival, to meet the needs that we all have. But what Jesus is telling us here is we are not made only of that. Jesus gives us a much more powerful message than simply saying, you know, don't don't overly attach ourselves to money, for instance, which is a very common interpretation of this passage. And then he will continue. He will say, where your treasure is, again, either the earthly treasure or the treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. When we talk about those treasures or those treasures in heaven, what is Jesus talking about? That's what commonly here in Spiritism we call our virtues. The respect, the forgiveness, what we call charity, right? The benevolence, forgiving others' faults, right? Looking at each other not from the point of view of superiority, right? Being humble, act with simplicity, love one another like you love yourself. Those are the treasures in heaven that Jesus is talking about. And obviously the treasures of earth. Jesus is not only talking about, the regular treasures of earth that we all have in our hands in a way. We have our lives, we have our bodies. Those are treasures. We have, all that we need to survive. We have food, we have water, we have one another, all treasures here. But Jesus is teaching us of the importance of those different kinds of treasure. And at the end of the day, what are those who are more important for us? Let's remember one thing. Jesus is not talking in that day specifically. Again, I wish, if I was, I don't know if I was there. I think probably I was doing something else during this time. I was probably, with mischieving or something else. But that's why we are here, to finally pay attention on what Jesus was telling us. But I can imagine that Jesus was not talking to us people. He was not talking to me, Tiago. But he was talking to me, spirit. Jesus in that moment is teaching us that the treasures that we are to cultivate and accumulate and use are those who are going to survive that very existence. And we are going to carry with us in our spirit, that will survive the incarnations. That will be the teachings, the learnings, the qualities, the skills that our spirits develop for eternity. The words of Jesus to us are eternal. They don't die. And that's what exactly Jesus is telling us. There are qualities and skills and treasures that we must learn and accumulate and practice and develop and achieve and improve that don't die. So let's look at it. Let's look at it. Jesus obviously will finish that passage to us with, the part that we know. No one can serve two masters, because there will be a conflict, and when we talk about those two masters, he's talking about something that doesn't match. It is not possible to ascend to a spiritual life with joys and virtues and light if we are overly attached to what this word here means. mammon. He presents to us a crossroad. There is no way to walk those two avenues at the same time. A few of the passages in the gospel will actually tell us that there are some directions that we must take, and they will inevitably lead us to different destinations, and that is one of them. First of all, what is this word? You cannot serve God and mammon. What is this? Now, many will think, because of the many translations that the Bible has, and if you go to the internet today, some of the websites are very interesting in terms of studying, right? You go to the many different versions of the Bible, and you have many different versions of the same passage. And in many of the passages, this word has been replaced with money. You cannot serve both God and money. It's a very curious translation. But again, remember, in Spiritism, we are never, totally satisfied. Like, we need to go deep, right? Like, we have the key of understanding of the essence of the message that Jesus brings to us. Not that we have access to the essence, but we can give a few steps ahead. Is it really money? Is it money really evil? Because if you look at that image, that is not a good image, right? That is one of the representations of mammon. Right? Mammon is many different things. Mammon has many different interpretations and significances. Let's look at them for us to try to have a more comprehensive understanding of what Jesus wanted to say. First of all, one of the definitions is mammon, from the very different translations, right, of this very word that likely was in the original Aramaic, is accumulation, riches, wealth gain. We're talking about the accumulation of riches, accumulation of possessions. So it is not simply money. We're talking about an action towards something that today we call money. It is an action. Jesus is telling us we act towards that wealth, the material wealth. We act towards that in a way that is unhealthy for us, that doesn't work for the immortal spirit. In art, in literature, especially influenced by, the mainstream religions, mammon is depicted as one of the fallen angels. Right? It is in the book, The Paradise Lost. He's one of the fallen angels. Let's remember, what is a fallen angel? Fallen angel in art, in literature, is those beings that rebel against God, wanting to take God's place. And because of that, they fall to earth. They are, relegated to earth. Few lectures ago, we had, I remember that we had a very interesting conversation about who are we in the Bible, right? Humans, Adam, Eve, and the desires that Adam and Eve to take the place of God in the creation. Mammon is the representation of humanity in its more raw, imperfect state. A lot of us, we as humanity, may be called, we are all fallen angels. We are on a path of redemption, restoring our place in creation, understanding who we are in relation to God, in relation to God's creation. What is our place? What is our role here? So, Jesus is talking about the path that leads to God and the path that keeps us here. Mammon represents then the negative pursuit of the wealth accumulation. The negative pursuit. When we say negative, it means the exaggerated, the superfluous, the not necessary for us, what is beyond our needs. In one word, what does that mean? Greed. We cannot serve God when we still cultivate greed. Greed is a product of our ignorance. Greed is a product of our selfishness. Is a product of our feeling that we deserve more than others. Sadly, it is also a symptom of our inferior position, spiritually speaking, because we still don't understand that, as Jesus said, we don't live only on bread and water, but how Jesus would say, but the word of God, right? We also need to cultivate the spiritual values, the spiritual qualities. Greed goes against us spiritualizing ourselves. So, after we have a bit of an understanding why is this so important, then obviously we will go to Spiritism, because not only Jesus puts that lesson in a very special place. Again, remember, he taught us that in the Sermon of the Mount, together with the Lord's Prayer, together with, let your light shine, together with blessed are the afflicted, the peacemakers. He put that lesson together with all of those other ones. And Allan Kardec, knowing that, also places that lesson in a very important context in the gospel according to Spiritism. Obviously, Allan Kardec could not interpret every single passage of the gospel in one book. So then he needed to pick, with the help of the spirits, with the sanction of the spirits, with the approval of the spirits, what were the passages that would then be the model for us to understand the message of Jesus? Remember, this book has a very important significance, because we can use the method that Allan Kardec used to understand and to unpack the essence of the message of Jesus, and use in many other passages and many other lessons. But he needed to handpick some passages. and he picked, you cannot serve both God and mammon, as one of the passages. It is very interesting because it is in the chapter 16 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And remember, Allan Kardec, inspired and guided by the Spirit, didn't write without a purpose. And the order, even, of the Gospel according to Spiritism is very important. He builds up knowledge and understanding together for us. He places that lesson just after the lesson, without charity there is no salvation. Remember when we talk about the charity, right? Benevolence, forgiveness, indulgence, which are the treasures of heaven, which is the spiritual treasures. And after speaking about you cannot serve both God and mammon, he brings that passage, be perfect. And remember, when we talk about being perfect, it is not about the absence of imperfection. But Allan Kardec reminds us, the true spiritists are those who imply every effort to combat their own imperfections. That is the relative, let's call the relative perfection that we can have today. It is to work very hard and to put all our energy and our effort to really combat our negative inclinations. Which means when we are faced with those crossroads, we need to imply all our efforts to understand the path that we take to spiritualize ourselves. It is a very important place because it is a very important lesson. I am repeating that because that was repeated to me every moment that I was learning this, and I wanted to share. Much more important than I ever thought before when I started preparing the lecture. And Allan Kardec will then develop that theme in the Gospel according to Spiritism, talking about the trials of the conditions that we find ourselves on earth. What are we doing with the gifts and concessions that God gives us? When we talk about the riches that we receive, Jesus, and then Allan Kardec says, it is not about money. It is not about the monetary, the financial aspect of this. It is these concessions that God gives to us and how we use it. And it may be wealth, material wealth for some. It may be intelligence. It may be the ability to communicate with others. It may be that magnetism that many people have that draw the attention of millions. It may be the difficult place that we are today. That is also a concession from God. If Jesus said in the same passage, blessed are you because you cry, because you are afflicted, because you are hungry and thirsty for justice, it's because God is also giving us a very important lesson for life, for the spiritual life, even with the challenges that are ahead of us. And those are the trials that Jesus is talking about. There is a providential function of every single state that we are. Every single drop of money that is in our hand. Every single person that entrusts their lives to us. or every single limitation and impossibility that we have a providential function. They are a test of what we call then our virtues. First of all, if we look at wealth, and it is important to talk about that, especially today in the 21st century, when probably, many years ago, people would say, oh, the 21st century, right? Everybody would live better. The technology would serve everybody, right? We're not going to have so many necessities in life. And here we are facing probably more disparity between material wealth and poverty than ever. Because this is also a providential concession given to those who accept the task to put that wealth to good use for the collective good. Remember, we are talking about us as spirits, accepting tasks and trials when we incarnate. Lessons that we receive that we need to put in practice when we incarnate. Receiving temporarily material wealth is a trial. Because we need to use and to put for the good use, for the collective good, not only ours. It is also a test for our generosity or our greed. Don't we have many examples like that even in the gospel? After Jesus teaches everybody, he looks at the multitude of people, and he's taken by compassion and said, they're hungry. Let's feed them. What do the apostles do? No, we don't have enough. We don't have money. We don't have much, to give. Jesus looks at, what do you have there in that basket? And they were trying to keep it. The bread and the fish, they were trying to keep it. And Jesus said, give me. Give me. Jesus doesn't give a lesson on, how to turn air into food. Jesus gives a lesson in generosity. He was teaching the apostles in that moment. We can do so much with little. God can multiply those virtues on us when we put that effort. We are being assisted by the spirituality. So, this is one of the examples that are given in the gospel according to Spiritism for us to understand better what Jesus wanted to say when he puts us in that crossroad between the material wealth and the spiritual life. This is the passage of the young rich man. Because after teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, there is this young, rich, very wealthy, materially speaking man that goes to Jesus and says, Master, what should I do to then achieve the kingdom of heaven, right? And Jesus, very generous, just repeats, summarizes the whole speech. That, well, remember, I love each other, love your neighbor as yourself. Do to others what you want others to do with you. Love God, above all. Like that kind of summarizes. And then he said, I do it all. Okay, I do it all. Is there anything else that, that would help me boost my opportunities? And obviously that Jesus probably understanding, how far that boy would go, and also testing, their limits and testing our limits in that sense. Says, sure, there is one more thing. gather all that you have, because you're a very rich man, right? Very wealthy materially, so there is an aspect of superiority. There is an aspect of really, standing out socially, materially speaking. Gather all that you have, sell it, and benefit the collective, benefit the poor with what you have. And it's a very interesting, the reaction of this young man. He's taken by a lot of sadness, because that place for him probably was very, very important. More than anything else, it seems to be more important for him making sure that he had it all. And then he left. We don't hear about him anymore. Jesus put him in that crossroad. And through that passage, Jesus shows us, does that mean, and then Spiritism will come to us. I said, does that mean that we need to sell everything that we have, and get? No. But what Jesus was trying to teach that men and us is, it is something very, very much against spiritualizing ourselves, the over attachment to material possessions and what comes with it. If we have a lot of money, we're going to call ourselves rich. If we have a lot of money, chances are we're going to acquire a lot of property. And this is going to make us stand out before everybody else. So it is not only the over-attachment to material possessions, but also what are we doing? Not only to ourselves, what are we doing to others? What are we trying to show? Remember, isn't that in the same Sermon on the Mount that Jesus says, when you pray, don't pray using, loud voice. Go back to your room, close the door, and in silence, hidden, you then have that conversation with God. And God that sees in the silence, that sees in the dark, sees everything, which means that he sees intimately within us, will then listen to what we're saying. We're not doing that for others, we're doing that for ourselves. Right? In the same way that he would say, when you are, fasting, or you are giving yourself some penitence, which back then was even, very evident material. Some people would really admonish themselves, physically. But don't do that in front of the multitudes. Who are you doing that for? What is Jesus teaching us here? We need to act with one thing that is called self-sacrifice. That is one of the ways that we can act with charity. How many times we have 5 minutes before we do something else and somebody calls and says, I need to talk to you. How many times we are ready to do something in our house, somebody knocks on the door and says, do you have a few minutes? Usually we are called to give when we tell ourselves that we don't have enough. Because Jesus is telling us, share. Let's share that time together. You may say you don't have enough. So share. The self-sacrifice that Jesus talks about is, if you have 2 pieces of clothes, give one. If somebody asks you to walk 1 mile, what do? You walk 2. Share the path with others. do it together, because the concessions that God gives to us are to be shared. Are to be shared. What about poverty? You just said that poverty is also a treasure, right? It is. It is a test on resignation. Blessed are the afflicted. Suffering with resignation and without rebellion. It is a trial for our envy of having what others have. As if we had, we would be happier. How many times the messages are very clear. Don't try to wish to have what others have. You have no idea the work that is needed for those who have to keep, to use well, and then to give account. Many times God is not giving us some of those concessions because God knows you are not going to use well, and you're going to increase your pain by regret, by looking back and understanding that you didn't use well the concessions that were given to you. It may be a trial. It may also be an expiation. It is not only about, what are we going to do with the concessions that were given, but also sometimes we are learning in a kind of a difficult way, in a challenging way, the bad use that we gave to the concessions that were given already to us, probably in different incarnations. Remember, we are talking about the immortal spirit living life and existence after existence. Finally, the lessons are the virtues and the vices that we have are not given by the material wealth or the material conditions themselves. The virtues and the vices are within the spirit. It is not how much or what we have, but how we put it to good use. What is our intention when we use that wealth? When we collect the material concessions, and what we do with them? How do we share? How do we multiply for the collective good? Remember, it is a temporary state. In this existence, that's what you're being given. And in many cases, even within one existence, we may navigate through different social states, material state, financial, like it also changes even within one incarnation. It can change at any time. And it is about the contributions that we give for the advancement and improvement of everybody and the planet. We are co-creators. We have a place in this world that is very important. Through material wealth, for instance, we improve the material, benefits for everybody, as much as we also accumulate through greed. That brings us to a very important topic, that is the diversity. And that maybe we can then extract those lessons and try to understand, why is this lesson important today? How can we look at what we are learning here and look at the world today and see what is the use for it? right? How can we put that into action today? Especially when we look around and there is so much inequality. What are we doing with it? How can I help in a way? First of all, before we start feeling hopeless, because it is very easy for us, you know, I was going to say open a newspaper, but today is more like, turn on your iPad and go to the news. Whatever means you have, it is very easy to be discouraged. It is very easy to feel hopeless. It is very easy to say, why bother even? What is my contribution? What can I do? I can do nothing. In the middle of so much that is happening, what can I do? The first thing that is important for us is to understand that we are in a world of diversity. Since the beginning of times, the world is a diverse place. And there is a reason for that. There is diversity of aptitudes, diversity of impulses, diversity of populations, of tendencies, of nations, of languages, of values. We live in a world of diversity. One of the first reasons that we learn we are immersed in diversity so then we can respect the differences. First of all, let's respect those differences. Let's value those differences. We are learning through living together that we are all different in a way, that we are all in different stages of evolution. And that's how we should be on this earth, because those who have more will help those who have less. Those who have certain abilities and skills will use for the benefit of those who still don't have. That is a very important social, matter related with the diversity. And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a very interesting question. So why God doesn't just distribute everything? It is God's concession, right? God can do whatever God wants with those concessions. But if we are so diverse, is this supposed equality going to last? No. Because some will use wealth, some will not. Some will use to multiply, some will use to combat others. Some will use to give, some will use to accumulate. The diversity will continue existing. It's not going to take much time. What does God do? God will then teach everybody by giving in turns. That's why nations, peoples, groups will then have more or less in different times in history. Civilizations and nations and groups always are moving up and down the ladder of material wealth, because it is a way that God helps everybody with the trials of riches and poverty. God is teaching us every moment, giving us those concessions and allowing us not to forget each other when we have, and not to rebel against each other when we don't. And Allan Kardec, in the end of every chapter, there is the Spirit's teachings. And one of the lessons is humans truly possess only what they can take with them from this world. It sounds like a cliche, but cliches are much more meaningful than we imagine, because we need an entire lecture to look at this phrase that in many ways is a cliche and makes sense of the depth of how important it is. Because right here, the spirits, just like Jesus did in the gospel, they are speaking with our immortal spirit. They are not speaking with our persona today. They are not telling us don't have material possessions, but they are telling us, remember that what you do with that is more important than how much you had. We don't take a list of what we had. We take a list of what we did with it. Forward. And the spirit Fenelon also will teach us that the bad use of those concessions will consist in using solely for personal satisfaction. Very well summarized. A good use, on the other hand, consists in all the times that results in some good for someone else. That is among the teachings of the spirits, to bring to a summary, to an understanding that is more general of why this lesson is so important for our spiritual advancement. So, summarizing the lessons of today, wealth and poverty are temporary, but what we do with them is not. The wealth is how we use our talents. Remember the parable of the talents? For those who have, it will be given more. For those who don't have, even what you have will be taken. That's what it is. It is not about what we have in terms of the possessions, but the talent is our real intentions, what we do with the concessions that God gives to us. It is on us to improve. We are in this society because it is on us also to help improve that society. It is on us to understand that we are here together for a reason. To help each other, to share that wealth with each other. The Spirit Emmanuel constantly in his messages would say, when you were touched by the light, you become responsible to sharing it and enlighten the life of others. To each one according to their needs. To each one according to what they do. What God lends us. And remembering that as important as any other phrase, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Thank you.
So Thiago's not going to be GM, but now it's up to you to ask for questions.
Oh, okay. Gislaine, okay. let me go back a little bit. Let's rewind. Thank you very much. Now, any question? Any comment?
We have two questions from the internet.
Oh, great.
Three. Okay, the first one is from Mel. He is saying, thank you, Thiago. How should we balance the use of our resources, time, money, intellectual, etc., between ourselves and our families and others?
Right. Very good question. I think family, when we talk about family, we talk about the very core group of spirits that we share our existence with. That are usually the most immediate group of spirits that we share mutual responsibilities with. So when we think about wealth or, time and resources that can be intellectual, it can be moral as well, it is important that we grow together as a family. If one person has a better job, let's make sure that these benefits is spread with everybody. We grow as a family. A family where there is one person who is more intelligent than other means that probably we have the responsibility to share that intelligence, to share those intellectual resources. It means that it is not only for us. Understanding that this is not only for us. It's very common today that we misunderstand education and say, I did it all by myself, so I need to make sure that, my offspring is going to struggle like I did to get what I received. At the same time, we are growing up together because we are restoring the ability to live well to those who probably in past existences we didn't treat that well. It is important to understand that families not only grow together, but families also, they heal together. We are playing different roles in each other's lives. And probably if we took in the past, we have the ability to restore today. If we have the opportunity to give a better education, to teach better values, to provide a little more comfort, there is nothing wrong with that. It is important that we do it. Just remembering, if then we realize that our families have enough, why not then teaching how to spread that? If this is something that we can do, and to make sure that others that are not necessarily within the confines of our blood relations can benefit from that as well, why not? So it is more than only the material possessions, it's also teaching the values. How can I then ensure that the people understand that what I'm doing with those concessions are something good for everybody? I hope that it helps.
Second question. How does the charity concept work in the spiritual world since there is no financial transaction?
Right. Very good question. Very good question. There may be not necessarily financial transactions, but transactions will happen as long as we need this kind of intermediary to measure the goodness that we do for others. So in André Luiz romances, right, in the André Luiz works, there is a measure of the work that you do. They call some sort of tokens, let's say, that we have. More we work, we accumulate some sort of, credit. So then it allows, the spirits to have also, in their own realm of existence, some conditions that can be then shared. That is even houses where others, can live together. So then you somehow still resemble a little bit of this life here because we are still beings of earth. We're going to continue incarnating. So charity will happen in the spiritual life because when we go to the spiritual life and we don't forgive, we don't reap the benefits of that forgiveness. When we go to the spiritual life and we still want revenge against others that somehow did bad to us, when a victim of a crime goes to the spiritual life and tries to ruin their perpetrators' lives, they will carry that burden with them because in the spiritual life, we suffer with the lack of charity. We suffer with the lack of forgiveness. We accumulate hatred. We accumulate conflicts. We accumulate sadness. And the sad part is by the time that we realize we are faced with all the negative that we did to others. This is an incredible pain for the spirit because we don't have that material limitations and constraints. The spirit would feel that in a different level. That's why the lessons are for us, incarnate spirits, because for sure those virtues, those qualities, and those skills and will be absolutely necessary because we will find ourselves in the spiritual life in a happier or unhappier state based on those values that we cultivate. They are directly related with our level of spirituality and elevation. Is it? Oh, one more?
One last question. Wonderful speech. Wondering how to manage giving to people who are only takers. If not those, they walk all over you. But how to those without feeling bad? Thanks.
Another very good question. That is amazing. So, Spiritism will teach us through one specific passage from the Gospel, which is, forgiving our enemies, praying for those who persecute us. Allan Kardec would say, does that mean that for those who did bad to us, do we need to open ourselves and be vulnerable enough that they are continuously, attacking or doing bad things to us? No, that is not it. What it is if we understand that if people are taking advantage or exploiting us, we have every single right to defend ourselves, our integrity, but it doesn't mean that we're going to do the same with them, and it doesn't mean that we're going to then seek revenge, or that we're going to ruin their lives in the same way that we believe that they are ruining ours. It doesn't mean that we are going to then deplete them of anything because we were depleted once. It is about making sure that you continue living your life. And if your spirit is a spirit of giving, you will find other opportunities to continue giving. And for those who took from you, belongs to them what they did. Doesn't belong to you anymore. Belongs to them. What they are going to do with what you gave belongs to them. You have the ability to say no. It is a hard thing for us to learn. And in our lives today, part of the reasons why we are together with others is also to learn how to say no. Sometimes the best way that we can help somebody else to grow is to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It doesn't mean that we are bad people because of that, but it means that we have a sense of responsibility of what we do with what we have. Remember, it is about those talents. What is our responsibility, right? Am I going to give money for those who are going to misuse? Or I may sit with them and still be present for them, but not necessarily give them money, but I may still be present for them in different ways, right? For those who already have money that we don't need to give, sometimes they need something else. They need probably a model. They need an example. Sometimes they need to hear no. Because they are so used. I usually say in my own profession, I dare to be a counselor. I usually tell people, you cannot expect that those who always took from you one day are going to give. Maybe not in this existence. They became specialists in taking. But if your spirit is a spirit of giving, you will find other opportunities to give and to make good use of your giving spirit. Let others who take, they're going to always have somebody else to take until the day that they are going to learn in their own way. That is not our way. Justice will find them not in the way that we think, maybe in a very unexpected way. They are going to have the opportunity to give. Probably they're going to have a lot one day and have the opportunity to give as well. So if your spirit is your spirit of giving, you will find ways to give. And let others do their part as well. Is that it? Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Amazing. Any question, any comment, folks? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. All right, so thank everyone who was with us over the internet. We're hoping to see you here back next week.